Was I wrong for disrespecting my aunt during a family vacation? I'm 29, and I grew up in a family where respecting your elders was never really up for debate. You greet them properly. You listen when they're talking. You don't talk back. And if an older relative says something that hurts your feelings, you laugh it off. At least that's what I was taught. And for years, there was one relative who really tested that rule. Let's call her Aunt Linda. She's 57, and she's my father's first cousin. Years ago, she got married and moved to Europe with her husband. Every once in a while, they would come back to the Philippines for a vacation, but whenever they came home, they had this little tradition. Before going off to their actual vacation destination, they'd spend a few days visiting and bonding with their respective families first. So they might come home, spend a couple of days with us, then head off somewhere like Boracay for the rest of their vacation before eventually flying back home. For this particular visit, our family decided to rent a villa for a couple of days. It was supposed to be a simple family gathering before Aunt Linda and her friends continued with their vacation. And honestly, I should have been excited. We didn't get to go on vacations very often, so normally I would have looked forward to something like this. But whenever I found out Aunt Linda was coming home, I'd quietly dread it. Because she was loud, she was boastful, and she was incredibly tactless. She always had something to say about everyone, especially the younger members of the family. Your weight, your height, your clothes, your job, your relationship. Basically, if there was something about you she could comment on, she would, and somehow there was almost always an insult hiding somewhere in the middle of it. The annoying part was that everyone already knew how she was. Whenever I'd complain to my parents, they'd just shrug. That's just how she is. She doesn't mean any harm. She's just blunt. She doesn't know when she's crossed a line. That's just her way of showing affection. Just laugh it off. So that's what I did. I laughed. For years. Even when I didn't find it funny. Even when I'd go home and replay something she'd said in my head. I just figured that was the price of keeping the peace. Then one year we found out she was coming home again. My first reaction was honestly, oh great. I even considered using work as an excuse not to go. But then I found out the family gathering had been scheduled around a holiday when most of us wouldn't have work. If I remember correctly, it was during Holy Week, so everyone was expected to be there. There went my excuse. The day finally came. Everyone was busy preparing food, bringing things to the villa, setting up the rooms, and getting everything ready before Aunt Linda arrived. Eventually, she arrived. This time, her husband wasn't with her. She had come with one of her close friends instead. After spending some time with our family, they would continue on with their own vacation plans. As usual, all of us from the younger generation lined up to greet her, and as usual, she had something to say about everyone. Jasmine, my oldest cousin, was the first target. Aunt Linda looked at her and said she had such a pretty face. Then came the inevitable but. It's just a pity you've gotten so fat. Jasmine gave an awkward laugh. Then Aunt Linda moved on to Ethan, one of my male cousins. She looked him up and down and said, "You're still so short. It's a pity you didn't get your father's height." Someone else got a comment about their hair. Someone else got criticized for their clothes. Someone else got asked why they were still single. It was the same thing I'd seen happen for years. A compliment, then a little jab, then a laugh, as if we were all supposed to find it funny. When it was finally my turn, she looked at me for a few seconds. Then her eyes widened. "Oh my goodness, you got so thin." I gave a short laugh and moved on. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. For the rest of the day, Aunt Linda talked about her life in Europe. At first, it was normal. She talked about the places she'd been, the things she did, and what life was like there. But eventually, almost everything became a comparison. The houses were bigger. The neighborhoods were nicer. Things were more convenient. The lifestyle was better. Even the villa we'd rented became part of the comparison. "Here, this is already considered grand," she said. "Where we live, houses like this are normal. A lot of houses already have pools." My cousins and I mostly stayed quiet. We didn't want to get pulled into another conversation, so whenever we could, we'd pretend to be busy with our phones. Then came the last evening of the trip. Before everyone settled down for the night, Aunt Linda asked all of us from the younger generation to sit near her. She had brought little gifts from Europe for everyone, chocolates, snacks, and other small things she'd packed in her luggage. So we gathered around her while she handed them out one by one. Then she started making comments again. Her eyes landed on Jasmine, the same cousin she'd called fat earlier. She looked at her and smiled. "You really have such a pretty face." Jasmine smiled politely. Then Aunt Linda continued, "It's such a pity if you and your husband don't pass those genes on." Jasmine's smile immediately disappeared. I noticed. Everyone noticed, because everyone in our family knew what they had been going through. They'd been trying to have a baby for a long time. They'd already gone through consultations and found out there was a medical issue making it harder for her to conceive. It was an incredibly sensitive subject. Jasmine had broken down over it more than once. We all knew how much it hurt her. Her husband tried to keep things light. He gave a small smile and said, "Maybe in God's perfect time." Then he tried to change the subject. He asked Aunt Linda about her vacation plans. But somehow she found a way to bring the conversation right back to Jasmine. "You should try losing some weight." Jasmine went quiet. Aunt Linda continued, "Maybe that's why you're having trouble getting pregnant." I just stared at her. I couldn't believe she'd actually said that. Jasmine looked uncomfortable. Her husband looked uncomfortable. Even the people around us suddenly seemed to know the conversation had crossed a line. I knew how sensitive this was for Jasmine. I'd seen how much the whole situation had affected her, especially when it came to her body. So I tried to interrupt. I picked up one of the snacks my mom had prepared and held it out to Aunt Linda. "Do you want some?" She waved it away. "No." Then she looked at me. "You need it more." I froze. She turned back to Jasmine. "You should get thinner." Then she pointed toward me. "But don't get as thin as her." She left. "It doesn't suit her. She looked better with a little more flesh on her bones." Then she looked at me again. "Are you on a diet?" I didn't answer. "If you are, you should stop. You've lost too much weight." And that was it. Something in me just went quiet. For years, I'd laughed whenever she made comments like that. I'd smiled, brushed them off, and told myself she was just being tactless. But this time I couldn't do it. I just stared at her blankly. No smile, no laugh, nothing. She stared back at me, and for a few seconds, neither of us said anything. I didn't yell at her, I didn't insult her, I didn't make a scene. I simply turned to Jasmine and asked, "Do you want to change into your swimming clothes?" She immediately said yes, so we got up and walked away. And somehow that tiny moment was enough to change the entire atmosphere. The conversation died. Aunt Linda became quiet. Everyone else suddenly seemed to find something very interesting to do. I didn't look back. For the rest of the evening, I tried not to cross paths with her, and surprisingly, she seemed to do the same. She stopped trying to get my attention. She barely looked in my direction. Honestly, I was perfectly fine with that. The next morning, while everyone was packing up and getting ready to leave, the messages started coming in. Some of my aunts and uncles, along with my parents, were telling me that what I did was disrespectful. They said I had embarrassed Aunt Linda. They said I should apologize. And then, of course, the reasoning was always the same. She's older than you. She's only here for 2 days. Why couldn't you just laugh it off? That's just how she is. You know she didn't mean any harm. And I already knew where this was going. Eventually, I'd probably have to sit down with my parents and listen to the same lecture I'd heard for years. That I should respect my elders. That I shouldn't embarrass the family. That whatever Aunt Linda said, she's still older than me. But meanwhile, my cousins were quietly giving me thumbs-up signs. Mara, one of my younger cousins, even told me she wished she'd had the courage to do what I did. She said she'd wanted to stand up for herself so many times, but she never had the guts. And honestly, that made me feel a little less guilty. Because I realized I wasn't the only one who was tired. We'd just gotten really good at pretending we weren't. And maybe my parents will still think I was wrong. Maybe I could have handled it differently. Maybe I could have smiled and walked away. But there's one thing I still can't understand. Why is it that when an older person makes cruel comments, everyone says, "That's just how they are. Don't take it seriously. They don't mean any harm." But the moment someone younger stops laughing along, suddenly we're the rude ones? Why are cruel comments from an older person treated as natural, while the same comments from someone younger are suddenly considered disrespectful? Isn't respect supposed to go both ways? I was taught to respect my elders, and I still believe in respecting older people. But I don't believe respect should mean silently accepting every hurtful thing someone says just because they're older. If we're expected to respect someone because of their age, shouldn't they also be expected to respect the people they're talking to, regardless of age?